Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk about the first two episodes of Marvel's What If. The premiere episode was called What If Peggy Carter Were the First Avenger. Now, I guess what they're doing with this series is a very particular thing. They're taking the films of the MCU and mixing it up a little bit and looking at just about all the same events, but from a different angle, if one thing or another that happened in the movies happened a different way. It's a little bit different from the What If comic series, as I understand it, which just threw out, random ideas month to month. It was set in the Marvel universe at large. It wasn't confined to a specific set of occurrences within the Marvel universe. So I don't know if that's the best premise in the world for a show, because the audience has already seen the movies. So it's basically like you're watching the movies again, except they change one or two things. So I don't know. It doesn't seem very ambitious to me. And it's not that it's without merit at all, but the comic was very ambitious with the things that it did, at least to my recollection. So I think I would have preferred that they, if they went in that direction. But anyway, let's see what we can say about this first episode. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool to see Peggy as a super soldier, but I wasn't sure why they didn't use the moniker Captain UK or Captain Britain instead of Captain Carter. They clearly gave her a British flag on her shield, and, she kept the red and white in the uniform of Captain America, but, red and white are in the Union Jack flag. So I didn't really understand why they didn't go with Captain UK or Captain Britain, which, if I'm not mistaken, was a character in Marvel. I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to confuse it with that. I don't know. See, in that case, I wouldn't have done it. I just would have left it alone. I don't think this first episode really did anything to the MCU that was different enough from what actually happened, that it was in any way thought-provoking. That goes to what I was saying a minute ago. Just I'm saying it more specifically now about this particular episode. It was the story of the first Avenger movie with a couple of tweaks. Not very thought-provoking, not very ambitious. It was more of the, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's different kind of thing. So it didn't wow me. I was hoping it would wow me. The trailer seemed like it was for a show that was going to wow me. I wasn't wowed by this episode. It is great that most of the original cast did the voices, and that the guy that got to play Steve sounded like Steve. So that's a plus, but it didn't wow me. Now, I've seen at least one other review of this episode, and I don't normally talk about other YouTubers. It's not my thing. If I have something to say to them, I say to them on Twitter or in their comments section, where they have the opportunity to go back and forth with me. I mean, they have that opportunity if I say something about them here, but it's not immediate. Anyway, I feel like I have to speak out because the things that this particular YouTuber said in their video are in line with things they've said about other shows and other movies that they're saying because they see everything through a particular lens, it seems to me. Now, I think they would say that they're just seeing what's there, and it just happens to be a lot of the same thing. I don't think that's 100% true. I think it's partly true. I think some of the things that they say have some merit, but a lot of the stuff doesn't. And a lot of the stuff sounds to me like stuff that they're, a lot of stuff that they mention seems to me to be stuff that they're seeing because they have a bias, or they have a preconceived notion, or they have, or they're almost looking for it. And so the smallest thing can seem to them to be a big thing, or something that it really isn't, and or that it might not be. I'll say that. And it just drives me insane. In this particular case, I'm talking about Gary over at Nerdrotic. He did a review of this episode, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. I don't want to come out and say someone's opinion is wrong, but it almost seems like a pathology with these guys. When I say these guys, I mean Nerdrotic, and I don't want to name anybody else, but YouTubers of that ilk. And it just disturbs me. The title for his video about this episode called it garbage. Now that's a very specific thing. You can say, I don't like something. You can say, you can have a title that says, this episode of this show was not great. This episode of this show was lacking. That's a critique. That's a fair critique. It leaves room for there to be redeeming qualities. To come right out and say this was garbage is quite different from saying that. You're saying that it's garbage, and I don't think it was garbage. And I know that it's possible that he did this for clicks. I'm not going to accuse him of doing that. I'm saying that it's possible that he uses hyperbole in his titles to get clicks. And I'm saying it's possible because that's a thing in entertainment. Sensationalism and hyperbole, it gets clicks, it gets press. That's just an industry thing. So for anyone who's hearing me and saying, well, he doesn't really think it's garbage, he just put that in there because that's the business, I'm aware that that's a possibility. But it's also possible that he thinks it's garbage. And his comments in the video gave this episode just about 0 quarter. And that's ridiculous. It isn't garbage. Is it the best thing that's ever come out? No. Was it lacking? Yeah, I just said it was. It was no great shakes. It wasn't, terribly thought-provoking. It wasn't awe-inspiring. It didn't turn anything on its head, which is what If is supposed to do. So if that had been his critique, I would have said, he's dead on. That's absolutely correct. But he took issue with things that occurred in the episode because they struck him as being indicative of an agenda on the part of the writers and or producers, etc. And I don't know what I hope more. I don't know if I hope more that he only said that because he really believes that those things are indicative of that, because that would make me sad. And I also don't know if I hope that he doesn't really see that and he was just saying it, for clicks or to have something to be pissed off about, because that would at least mean that he knows the truth. But again, that would also make me sad that he did that. So it's almost like I can't, I'm bummed out either way, whichever of those things is the case. Let me try to tell you some of the things that he said. I'm going to try to remember them. He said he didn't like the fact that Captain Carter looked like a man with a woman's head. And he said that this is something that they've been doing, they, meaning Hollywood, whatever, have been doing for a while. This, of course, is a reference to Tila in the Masters of the Universe thing and other characters, I guess, that he's seen. And on this particular point, I can't totally disagree with him. I think she did kind of look like a guy with a lady's head. The thing is that Gary thinks this is part of an agenda, that they're trying to make women look like men because they're trying to have strong female characters that won't attract the male gaze, or they're trying to equate women to men because they don't want to be second to men. So he sees it as agenda. I see it as just a poor design choice. He also went on and on in his critique of this episode about other things. He said that they made Captain Carter much stronger than Captain America, and they made her fight much better than Captain America, of course, because she's a woman, and the woman has to do everything better than a man in the agenda. I didn't see that. She didn't seem to me to be better than Captain America. She didn't seem to me to fight better than Captain America. Now, to be fair, Gary's a big comic book reader and has been for a very long time. I read some comics in my younger days, but my familiarity with Captain America comes from the MCU films. A couple of different cartoons that had Captain America in them that came out in the wake of the Avengers films that were companions to the Avengers films. There was a Captain America movie that came out in the early 90s. And there were some Captain America cartoons when I was a young kid. So that's my familiarity. If his familiarity is deeper than that, then he might know better than I what Captain America's abilities were in the source material. And he might be qualified to say that she came off as looking stronger and better and all of that versus that. But by that yardstick, I think the MCU version of Captain America would have been stronger and better, because I didn't see a difference between the MCU Captain America and the MCU Captain Carter. So I don't know quite what he was saying there, but either way, it's something that was off base, because if it's also true of the MCU version of Captain America, who cares if it's true of the what if version of, a super soldier woman? Who cares? What's the beef? I don't get it. He pokes fun at the fact that Peggy Carter takes some sexist, vitriol in this episode. And of course, to him, that's part of an agenda. They had to show the guy being a sexist pig, and they had to make the woman, strong because she endures it and overcomes it. But it takes place in World War II. That's how women were treated in World War II. So are people who are doing stories about World War II supposed to leave that stuff out just so you don't accuse them of having an agenda? I don't get it. Like, what's the complaint? Just shut up. Another thing that he talked about was how in this version of the first Avenger movie that was this episode, Peggy saves Bucky, which Cap wasn't able to do. And he just thinks that they did that because they're trying to push an agenda to elevate females. And he also said something about there wasn't a white male in the thing that wasn't a jerk, or no, he said that the jerk in the episode was, of course, a white male. Are you only happy, Gary, if the jerks are people of color? Is that what you want to see? You want to see entertainment where all the jerks are people of color or women? Is that what it's going to take for you to not accuse a production of being woke? I find that problematic.
Part of my issue with Gary's review video is also the fact that he didn't give the episode credit for things that, in my mind, go against his argument that they're pushing a woke agenda. For example, Steve is still in the episode, even though he's not Captain America, and he's depicted very heroically. He flies a giant mech suit that Tony Stark made for him, and he kicks ass. He even saves Captain Carter's bacon at one point when he flies in as air support. He even still manages to attract the girl, what we would call still gets the girl or gets the girl in the old days, even though the version of him in this story is the scrawny little guy from the beginning of the Captain America movie. So, that flies in the face of this idea that there's an agenda on behalf of the people who wrote this episode to diminish men and elevate women. If that's what they were doing, then they wouldn't have done those things that I just said and made them part of the story.
The other stuff he said about the episode, was that there were a couple of plot holes. And, I think there were maybe a couple of things in there that you could say were plot holes. So he was right about that. But to call it garbage, just not true. And if I'm honest, I think he did it for clicks. I think he was hyperbolic about this episode. I think he looks for things to complain about. He's not alone. I think he looks for things to be outraged about because I think it gets clicks, it gets views. It's either that or he's out of his mind. And seeing woke everywhere. Woke, it's everywhere. No, it's not. You're seeing things that aren't there, or you're seeing things that are there for a reason other than agenda, that you think are there for agenda, but they're not. And I just wish he weren't doing it. And I wish the couple of other people who do it weren't doing it. I started watching Gary because he was harsh in his critiques of Star Trek Discovery, and Star Trek Discovery deserves harsh criticizing. I agreed with about 8 out of every 10 things he said about that show, because he only found about 2 out of every 10 things that were woke agenda, which I didn't think were, or I thought might be, because Discovery isn't immune to that. There's stuff in there that you could go, I think that's woke agenda, but because it's not as though I don't know it's out there. Okay, Supergirl season 4 was over the top woke agenda, and it was awful. So I know it's out there. I'm not in denial, but I think, I don't know, I don't see it in anywhere near the proportion or level that he and YouTubers of his ilk see it. And I think it's terrible to just come out and dismiss something as garbage that was maybe really a 6 out of 10. I think it's disingenuous. I think it's toxic, and I shouldn't be doing it. That's all I have to say about this episode. I know I spent way more time on Gary than on the episode, but like I said, there wasn't much to the episode. The second episode was What If T'Challa Became Star-Lord? This episode was better. It did a couple of interesting things that made you sort of think a little bit more. It starts off where T'Challa gets in a fight with one of Ronan's henchmen, just like Star-Lord does in Guardians of the Galaxy. Except this time, the henchman really does know who Star-Lord is and really admires his work. But he says, I'm sorry, I have to stop you from stealing this artifact because, my boss wants it. But T'Challa wants it because he's going to use it to revive a star so that a planet or a system of planets won't die out. And he defeats this guy in battle, and in a fight, I should say, and brings him onto his ship. We have a flashback after that to T'Challa's childhood, during which he expresses a desire to learn, to see the outside world, to leave Wakanda and see the outside world. He does end up leaving the protective bubble of Wakanda to retrieve a spear, and he ends up getting abducted by Yondu instead of Peter. Well, Yondu's men, I should say, because they were stupid and kidnapped the wrong guy. They were looking for Peter, and I don't know why they were looking for Peter outside Wakanda or in the middle of Africa or wherever that is, but anyway, plot hole. Anyway, so it ends up that T'Challa is raised by Yondu instead of Peter. Then we flash back to the present and we find that T'Challa apparently at some point ran into Thanos and convinced him not to pursue his agenda of wiping out half of the life in the universe and to work with him and the Ravagers. He meets up with Nebula, who has hair, and who, of course, had a very different life. And he talks to her, and he says that Wakanda was destroyed shortly after he was taken under Yondu's tutelage. The Ravagers, which includes Nebula, want to steal a powerful terraforming agent from the Collector. Yondu needed to be convinced that it could be done, but he joins on. T'Challa enlists Howard the Duck to lead him to the agent in the warehouse of the Collector once they get there. But he gets separated from him and he finds a Wakandan ship in the possession of the Collector and learns that Wakanda was actually not destroyed, which prompts an argument between him and Yondu, who had lied to him. Nebula double crosses him as the Collector wanted the Prince of Wakanda in his collection, and she owed him a debt, I guess, and it ends up causing all the Ravagers to be put in a cell. But she then releases them, and we learn that it was all a ruse to fool the Collector and that T'Challa was in on it. So it was like a double cross, triple cross, flippity floppity thing. And she really didn't turn on him, which is great. There's a fight with the Collector, who uses Hel's, the Thor's sister, her helmet and her blade against T'Challa. And we also see that he has Captain America's shield, which is weird. Yondu intervenes in the fight, but his wand is destroyed. We see Nebula toss particles of the terraforming agent into the mouth of a thug in order to rescue herself and Thanos from him, and he explodes as a tree grows out of him. The Collector winds up detained and in a case, but he gets removed from the case by dark elves who have a bone to pick with him that were released by T'Challa and Yondu. T'Challa goes home to Wakanda with the Ravagers, and of course, everybody's happy to see him. We end the episode with Peter being approached while at work at a Dairy Queen by Ego, who introduces himself as his father. So it was pretty cool. Again, all the same actors are doing the voices. It was great to see T'Challa again, especially since it was voiced by Chadwick Boseman before he passed. And it was interesting to think about, you know, what if Nebula's life had been different? So I enjoyed it. Groot wasn't in it. Rocket wasn't in it. Gamora wasn't in it. I found that to be disappointing. But I think the biggest disappointment I had with this, though I did quote unquote like it, is that again, it was no great shakes. It wasn't mind-blowing. It wasn't mind-bending. It wasn't terribly thought-provoking. And it was a little far-fetched, really, because they say that, you know, Thanos decided not to do his plan, but he's always talking about how it could still work. But I guess he's not. He's determined to actually not do it, even though part of him still wants to do it and thinks it would work. What I think would have been a more interesting what-if story is what if T'Challa met Thanos and talked him out of his plan? And the whole episode were that, where it was a sort of battle of wits between them as they're arguing over whether or not he should do it. And I know some of that was explored in the movies, you know, because he talks a lot about his motivations and tries to justify it and all of that. But in this story, he has changed his mind. So it would have been cool, I think, to see him go through the whole process and arrive at the decision not to do it. You know what I'm saying? I think that would have been a much more interesting what if that they could have done with a couple of the characters from the MCU if they were going to do a what if story. What if Thanos could have been talked out of it? Wouldn't it have been great to see that play out? The actual convincing of him not to do it? The actual decision by him, the actual evolution toward that point by him? I think that would have been much better. But I don't know, they may have been trying to keep it light so that kids would get something out of it or kids would watch it. It is on Disney. I don't know. I'm going to watch the rest of it and I think I'm going to enjoy it to some extent. But if it's just going to be, hey, it's the movie you already saw condensed into a half hour and we threw in some curveballs, I think it's a wasted opportunity for a series that, you know, for something that could have been a great series, thought-provoking, mind-bending, mind-blowing, mind-boggling, but instead it's just kind of, that's interesting. So, I don't know, maybe the other episodes will be better. I'm looking forward to the zombie one. We know there's a zombie one from the trailer, so I don't know. We'll see. I'll be back with reviews of those episodes. I'm going to get out of here for now. As always, I say, peace and long life.